Thank you. Yes. The footage you just saw is from a shocking attack that happened last Sunday, the 14th. The target was a residential building located in the city of Gaza. In just a few minutes, it was completely destroyed.
Thank you.
Reduced to rubble. According to the Israeli Defense Forces, the building was being used by Hamas to coordinate terrorist activities. But this was just the beginning. The next day, Monday, an intense sequence of strategic bombings took over the region. Meanwhile, the United States Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was in Jerusalem discussing the war. Then, in the early hours of Tuesday, the 16th, things changed quickly. Israel decided to carry out a grand operation and fulfill a promise it had made almost 2 years ago. This promise was made right after the terrorist attacks of October 7, 2023. At that dramatic moment, Netanyahu declared that Israel would not rest until it completely eliminated Hamas from Gaza. He was not just talking about defeating, but about totally destroying the group's ability to govern and operate militarily. Since then, Israel has controlled about 75% of the Gaza Strip. But the city of Gaza remained the last major stronghold of Hamas. But now, Operation Gideon's Chariots 2 represents the final fulfillment of that promise, and the name was not chosen by chance. Gideon was a biblical warrior who defeated an enemy army that was much larger in number. The name seems to signal that this will be the final and perhaps decisive battle against Hamas. Right at the beginning of the offensive, Israeli Defense Minister Yisrael Katz declared that the Gaza Strip is in flames. He said, "The defense forces are striking the terrorist infrastructure with an iron fist, and the soldiers are fighting bravely in order to create the conditions for the release of the hostages and the defeat of Hamas." Now, let me show you the scale of this operation because it's impressive. Israel has mobilized 2 full divisions of the Israel Defense Forces to advance on Gaza City. A 3rd division remains in strategic reserve, ready to reinforce specific sectors as needed. The numbers are unexpected. Tens of thousands of reservists have been called up, with some sources mentioning up to 80,000 new soldiers. This large reservist mobilization is happening for a specific reason. After almost 2 years of non-stop fighting, many soldiers from the regular troops are exhausted. Some have fought for more than a year without interruption. Israel needs rested soldiers who are ready to face what promises to be the most intense and challenging phase of the war. The military strategy has completely changed. Until now, Israel was facing a recurring problem: Hamas's hit-and-run pattern. This is basically what would happen. The Israeli forces would clear a sector, defeat the terrorist cells, but then they would find out that new fighters were showing up armed in other locations. Hamas had the incredible ability to regroup and build up its forces again. That's when Israel decided to change its military doctrine, aiming to break this endless cycle. The new strategy now is to clear, hold, and deny. This means, in other words, that they don't just want to defeat the enemy, but rather to consolidate territorial control permanently. This marks a major change. They went from targeted operations to a long-term occupation. And as you can imagine, this new approach requires immense resources. In addition to rested troops, accurate intelligence information, and a lasting commitment to hold the conquered areas are necessary. Military analysts estimate that the fighting could last for at least 6 months. And the scenario where this battle takes place makes everything even more challenging. That's because the city of Gaza has been reduced to a field of ruins after months of intense bombings. These ruins offer almost perfect cover for Hamas fighters. They can set up devastating ambushes and disappear within seconds, using every piece of rubble as cover. Urban combat is considered one of the most difficult in modern warfare, but fighting among ruins takes that difficulty to extreme levels. Every move must be calculated, every advance carefully planned. Meanwhile, diplomacy works behind the scenes. Marco Rubio's visit to Jerusalem was not a mere coincidence. The United States maintains its public support for Israel, but also quietly pushes for a diplomatic solution. Rubio brought a direct message from President Trump. The United States supports Israel's right to self-defense, but at the same time wants a ceasefire tied to the release of all 48 hostages, still held by Hamas. But Rubio seems to be pessimistic when we talk about a deal with Hamas. He believes there is little time for negotiations, something like just a few days or, at most, a few weeks. This indicates that the diplomatic route may be practically closed. What is this? What is? An action that generated controversial reactions, carried out by Israel a few days before the ground operation. That demonstrated it well. Israel attacked Hamas leaders in Doha, Qatar, exactly when they were participating in ceasefire negotiations. Netanyahu defended this attack, stating that Israel has the right to pursue terrorists anywhere in the world. But this action had major diplomatic consequences. Qatar, which acts as a crucial mediator between Israel and Hamas, strongly condemned the attack. The international community also responded negatively. And more importantly, Trump publicly distanced himself from the decision, stating that it was made solely by Netanyahu. The humanitarian situation in Gaza further complicates the military operation. That's because more than 1 million Palestinians are concentrated in the Gaza City region and neighboring areas. Israel accuses Hamas of systematically using these civilians as human shields, preventing their evacuation to safer zones. According to estimates, 200,000 people managed to leave the city before the start of the new offensive. This situation puts the Israeli Defense Forces in front of a complex problem. After all, how will they conduct effective military operations in the midst of a dense civilian population where the enemy deliberately hides among ordinary people? Israel has already given some hints about how it intends to achieve this. Sources connected to the Israeli Ministry of Defense assure that the advance will be slow and meticulous as a way to protect both soldiers and civilians. But
what are you going to do with what is Brazil? Is it our society?
that also means the operation will be prolonged and costly. Within Israel, there are significant divisions over this strategy. Massive protests have taken to the streets in recent weeks, with hundreds of thousands of Israelis demanding a diplomatic agreement that prioritizes the release of the hostages. The families of the kidnapped argue that the military pressure is putting their loved ones at even greater risk. The political opposition, led by Yair Lapid, harshly criticizes the operation. Lapid called the plan a disaster that goes against the advice of the Israeli Security Experts Council. He argues that this will lead to the deaths of more soldiers and hostages without achieving clear objectives. There are also some sectors of the military and security community in Israel that advocate for a more cautious approach, prioritizing a deal for the hostages instead of a large-scale assault. These experts fear that intense urban combat could result in the deaths of the remaining hostages, as has happened before. There's no denying that. This tension between political leadership and the military reflects a deeper debate about the objectives of the war. Netanyahu defends the idea of a total victory, that is, the complete destruction of Hamas. His critics, on the other hand, argue that this goal may be a dangerous illusion. The operation is also facing increasing international pressure. Several European countries, including France and the United Kingdom, have signaled their intention to recognize a Palestinian state in response to the conflict. Netanyahu acknowledges this growing isolation, but argues that Israel must be prepared for it and become more independent, especially in the arms industry. He sees international pressure as part of the psychological warfare against Israel. But after all, what can happen from now on? What happens now? Well, the future scenarios for Operation Gideon's Chariots, too, vary drastically. In the best case for Israel, the defense forces managed to take operational control of Gaza City, eliminate the main Hamas cells, and establish a stable military presence. This would allow for the declaration of the total victory that Netanyahu has been advocating for 2 years. But this optimistic scenario comes with enormous costs. Israel would take on the responsibility of governing a devastated territory with more than 2 million inhabitants, destroyed infrastructure, and deep resentment against the occupation. This would demand vast military and economic resources for years or decades. The intermediate scenario involves a prolonged military stalemate. Hamas, even weakened, could maintain urban guerrilla capabilities for months or years. Israel would control the territory on paper, but would face constant attacks, ongoing casualties, and increasing pressure to find a political solution. The worst-case scenario for Israel would be a catastrophic event involving multiple casualties among soldiers or hostages, and that could leave Israel in a worse strategic position than before the operation. One thing became quite clear. For Hamas, the strategy is simple. They just want to survive. Survive long enough to force Israel to accept a ceasefire that preserves at least part of its organizational structure. They know that each day of resistance increases the political and military costs for Israel. And in that sense, Israel, time is on Hamas's side. After all, the longer the operation lasts, the greater the internal wear in Israel and the international pressure. The terrorist group seems to be betting that the political cost of continuing the war will eventually outweigh Netanyahu's determination to achieve total victory. But things won't be that easy for them. Marco Rubio has already signaled that American patience has its limits. Although the United States maintains public support for Israel, there is growing pressure for the operation to produce concrete results quickly. As you can see, Operation Gideon's Chariots, too, represents much more than just a military campaign. It's a high-stakes gamble. Netanyahu believes that only a complete military victory can guarantee Israel's security in the long run. On the other hand, his critics argue that this approach ignores political realities and could create more regional instability. One thing is certain. The coming weeks and months will reveal which vision proves to be correct. And you What's your view on this operation? Do you believe that Israel will be able to completely eliminate Hamas from Gaza? Leave your comment below. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe to the channel and share the video. See you next time.